Most people never find this kind of content, and even when they do, they look away. It's easier to stay blind than admit you've been controlled. But you didn't scroll. You're still here. That means you're different. And what you're about to learn will make you impossible to use. This isn't self-help. This is psychological insurgency. But till the end and disappear from there. Before we begin, let me make one thing clear. This video is divided into 5 parts, and each one reveals a layer of control you've never been taught to see. In part 1, I reveal the core operating system of Machiavellian thinkers, how they process the world, remove emotion, and think in pure strategy. In part 2, I expose the advanced psychological tactics they use to reshape perception, loyalty, and reality without ever being noticed. In part 3, I'll show you how to detect their control before it infects your thinking using 5 early warning signals. In part 4, you'll learn the defensive systems that make you unreadable, unshakable, and impossible to manipulate without saying a word. And in part 5, I'll show you how to build silent influence, power that doesn't rely on manipulation, but presence, precision, and psychological gravity. If you're tired of being outplayed, it starts now. Let's make something clear right now. Machiavellian thinkers don't operate like the rest of the world. They don't ask what's right. They ask what works. They don't think in terms of fairness, emotions, or social rules. They think in outcomes, leverage, and control. At the core of every high-functioning manipulator lies a mental operating system designed to strip out emotional interference and replace it with one thing: strategic precision. Most people are reactive. Machiavellian minds are predictive. They don't care how you feel. They care how you respond. And they structure every move to make sure your response benefits them, even if it looks like you made the choice yourself. Now, here's the part most people miss. This isn't about being a villain. Most true Machiavellian thinkers don't act out of cruelty. They act out of clarity. They've simply replaced emotional noise with tactical reasoning, not because they hate people, but because they understand that human behavior is easier to shape than most people realize. So, let's break down the core framework that drives their thinking. This isn't just a quote. It's a governing principle. Machiavellian minds are goal-oriented to a fault. They measure the value of actions not by how they look, but by what they produce. If charm creates influence, they'll be charming. If silence causes fear, they'll go quiet. If vulnerability wins loyalty, they'll bleed just enough to keep you close. It's not personal, it's math. This is why they seem calm during conflict, flexible in chaos, and unshaken when others get emotional. Because they've trained themselves to prioritize strategy over self-expression. High manipulators don't eliminate emotion. They compartmentalize it. They don't ignore their feelings, they archive them. Emotion becomes a data point, not a dictator. They still feel fear, envy, desire, but instead of reacting, they analyze. They might use emotion in public. They might even perform it convincingly. But behind the scenes, they're asking one thing. How can this emotion be leveraged for advantage? When they praise you, it's often a test. When they open up, it's rarely random. They're not connecting. They're calculating. This is the part most people find uncomfortable. Machiavellian thinkers view relationships functionally. They categorize people by role, information, sources, gatekeepers, reputation, enhancers, obstacles to be neutralized. They don't bond blindly. They track value. They may form deep relationships, but those relationships are maintained only while they align with the goal. Doesn't mean they're heartless. It means they're strategic with their loyalty. You'll often find that these individuals have multiple relationship portfolios, different networks that serve different needs. They rarely rely on one person for everything. That's not by accident. It's insurance. The average person makes decisions based on emotion, assumptions, and how things feel. Machiavellian thinkers make decisions based on power flow, timing, and silence. They see the same social landscape you do. They just move through it differently. Where you hesitate, they adapt. Where you explain, they observe. Where you trust, they test. And unless you understand their framework, you'll keep mistaking their strategy for sincerity right up until they've already taken what they came for. Music. By now, you understand this much. Machiavellian thinkers don't chase power. They build systems to attract it, extract it, and redistribute it in silence. But here's what most people never see. The deeper you go into this mindset, the more subtle and effective the tactics become. They stop relying on basic manipulation and start running psychological code underneath everything they do. Here are 4 elite-level tactics they use. Methods that don't just win arguments or social points. They reshape loyalty, reputation, and long-term control. Tactic 1. Reality fracturing. This tactic isn't about lying. It's about shifting your perception of what's true. Machiavellians will subtly create contradictory realities around you. They'll say one thing privately, then act differently in public. They'll support you in one context, then undermine you in another, just enough to cause doubt. The goal isn't to break your confidence outright. It's to fracture your certainty, so you become more dependent on them for clarity. You'll start questioning your own memory, reinterpreting events to match their version, and eventually defaulting to their judgment over your. That's not confusion. That's programming. Tactic 2. Controlled conflict engineering. They don't avoid conflict, they design it. Skilled Machiavellians will manufacture tension between people just close enough to be believable, then offer themselves as the neutral middle. They plant seeds. They frame interactions. They tilt perspectives just slightly out of alignment, and then they step in to fix. By doing this, they become the one person who seems calm, rational, and indispensable, while everyone else looks unstable, emotional, or untrustworthy. They don't just rise, they rise by comparison. Tactic 3. Strategic silence as social dominance. Most people talk to be heard. Machiavellians use strategic silence to create psychological gravity. In meetings, debates, or confrontations, they'll go completely still. No reaction, no rebuttal. Not because they agree, but because silence is anxiety-inducing. The longer they stay silent, the more pressure builds. The more you talk, the more you reveal. Eventually, you begin correcting yourself, weakening your position, or shifting your tone just to break their stillness. That's when they strike. Silence in their hands is not passivity. It's a weapon. Tactic 4. Reputational inversion. This is one of the most dangerous tactics because it's long-term. Civilians don't attack your reputation directly. They slowly invert. They'll highlight your strengths but reframe them as threats. He's really ambitious. He's probably stepping on people to get ahead. She's confident. She's difficult to manage. He works hard. He's trying to make the rest of us look bad. It's subtle. It's repeated. And it's always plausible. Over time, people start seeing you through a distorted lens. Not because of what you did, but because of how they framed you. You won't see the damage until the room goes cold, and you realize everyone's been quietly turned against you. But these tactics work because they don't attack you directly. They attack the space around you, your certainty, your relationships, your reputation, your rhythm. They're not playing games. They're running code, rewriting reality through timing, silence, and suggestion. And if you don't learn how to see the fingerprints behind the performance, you'll keep being cast in roles you didn't choose in stories they wrote. Before we enter the next part, there's something I need to show you. Something I wasn't planning to mention, but those who found it aren't thinking the same anymore. This isn't a product. It's a backdoor into everything I've built for minds that are done being shaped, silenced, or studied. In the Whisperers Power Bundle, you'll get every ebook I've ever released, every audiobook I've ever recorded, lifetime access to every future drop, no upsells, no upgrades, no limits, and a permanent seat inside the system I built to outthink the system around you. This was never meant for everyone, but if you feel it, that shift, that hunger, that cold clarity starting to form, then the gate is open. Use code WHISPER35. Only 30 entries before I lock it again. You won't see this promoted. You won't hear about it twice. Links hidden in the pin comment. Get in before they realize what you're downloading. By the time most people realize they've been manipulated, the damage is already done. The loyalty's been extracted, the reputation's been shifted, the outcomes already moved in someone else's favor. That's not because they were weak. It's because they weren't trained to see it. Civilian thinkers don't reveal themselves through dramatic moves. They move through micro-signals, subtle patterns in behavior that on their own seem harmless, but together form a blueprint of silent control. This part isn't about fear. It's about awareness. Because once you know what to look for, you start seeing them early. You interrupt the pattern before it finishes building. Here are the 5 key recognition signals of a Machiavellian operator. 1. Patterned emotional mismatch. Pay close attention to how people respond emotionally in different settings. Machiavellian thinkers often show calculated emotion, not authentic emotion. They'll express concern, empathy, even vulnerability. But it's timed, too clean, too well-placed, too precise. They seem just emotional enough to avoid suspicion, but never so emotional that it costs them control. If their reactions feel like they were written for effect, they probably were. 2. Consistent information asymmetry. Watch for this. They ask questions, lots of them, deep ones, smart ones. They seem genuinely curious about your thoughts, your history, your stress points. But they share very little in return. And when they do, It's vague, curated, or emotionally hollow. Machiavellians thrive on asymmetry. The more they know about you, and the less you know about them, the easier you are to shape. If you always feel seen but rarely see them, you're being managed. 3. Hyperontextual behavior shifts. One of the most chilling signs, they behave differently depending on the people present. Around one group, they're dominant. Around another, they're passive. Around you, they're supportive until someone higher status walks in and they instantly shift tone. This isn't adaptability. It's identity. Modulation. A conscious strategy to extract the most value from each environment. Their real personality, it doesn't exist. They are who they need to be to move the board. For the manipulators pause. Machiavellians use silence differently, not just in arguments, in interactions. They pause just long enough to make you explain yourself further, make you fill in the blanks, make you question what you said. They don't interrupt. They let you talk too much, and they collect every word. That pause isn't indecision. It's a space for you to expose more than you meant to. 5. The favor-backed loyalty trap. At first, they're helpful. They go out of their way. They do things for you before you even ask. It feels generous. It feels rare. But over time, you'll notice a pattern. Their generosity starts to feel like a debt. You feel obligated to agree, to support them, to defend them when others question their motives. This is favor-based loyalty, engineering, and it's one of the most effective forms of long-term control. They don't need your fear. They need your guilt. The most dangerous. Manipulators never raise their voice. They never break the rules. They just quietly rewire your decisions, your perception, and your emotional balance, until you're choosing exactly what they wanted while thinking it was your idea. The earlier you spot the pattern, the less damage they do. And once you learn to see through performance, you stop reacting and start recalibrating the entire room. You've seen the pattern. You felt the tension. Now it's time to respond. But not emotionally, tactically. The most dangerous thing you can do when dealing with a Machiavellian manipulator is fight them on their terms. They want you reactive. They want you exposed. They want you to flinch. So, the goal isn't confrontation, it's containment. Quietly, making them realize you can't be controlled without saying a single word. These are the 5 psychological countermeasures that make you unreadable, unshakable, and unplayable. Defense 1. Strategic ambiguity. Machiavellian thinkers extract power by mapping you, your beliefs, routines, fears, needs. So, your first line of defense is to blur the map. You don't overshare. You don't explain your thoughts. You don't justify your decisions. Instead, you operate with strategic ambiguity. Give neutral answers. Change subjects gracefully. Respond with calm questions, not emotion. When they can't predict your next move, they can't prepare for it. And when they can't place you in their system, you become unusable. Defense 2. Non-compliance without conflict. Machiavellians test you early. Small requests, favors, personal questions, emotional hooks. Most people either say yes to avoid discomfort, say no and trigger conflict. You do neither. You simply don't react. You delay. You redirect. You smile and give nothing. This is non-compliance without friction. A silent refusal to play the role. They've scripted for you. Over time, they realize you're not just hard to move. You're not worth moving. Defense. 3. Controlled gaps in availability. Here's what most people miss. Cavalian. Control doesn't just require access to your mind. It requires access to your time. They want you responsive, present, always reachable. So, you do the opposite. You create controlled gaps in availability. You become slightly harder to contact, slower to respond, less present when they expect you to be fully engaged. This subtle withdrawal breaks their rhythm and signals one thing. You are not dependent, and people who aren't dependent can't be manipulated. Defense. 4. Selective agreement, then pivot. When Cavalian manipulators speak, they test the social frame. Will you challenge them? Will you submit your answer? Neither. You occasionally agree, but only selectively, then pivot the conversation somewhere unexpected. That's a smart point, but have you noticed this instead? You're right about that, which is why I'm considering a different direction. This keeps them in a loop. They feel acknowledged, but never in control. You let them win the sentence, but not the narrative. Defense. 5. Mirror their strategy without imitating it. This is the final stage. Not just resisting their control, but reflecting it back in a form they understand. You don't use their tactics emotionally. You use them surgically. You ask them strategic questions. You use silence to create discomfort. You show calibrated calmness under pressure. You signal, I know the game and I'm not playing it. I'm watching it. That alone is enough to destabilize most Cavalians, because the one type of person they avoid is someone they can't map, can't control, and can't read. That's who you become. Cavalian. Control depends on prediction. They work in systems. If they can't read you, place you, or extract from you, they leave you alone. Not out of respect, out of calculation. So don't seek revenge. Don't try to expose them. Just become useless to their strategy and quietly move on while their system glitches in your absence.